There's unfair bosses, there's gimmick bosses, and there's something that sits somewhere in between. These are the bosses that break the rules of the game, and they're some of the most memorable moments a game can have, for better or worse. But what does it actually mean to break the rules? The easiest place to start is, of course, with gimmick bosses. These are fights where you're forced to apply the game's mechanics in a new way. They're great for breaking up the pace, making the player stop and think for a second, and then after they're over, you go back to the core gameplay loop. But they also tend to live or die on spectacle. Most of the time, they're not the high point of the game. I've got a whole video talking specifically about them if you're interested. On the other side, you've got bosses that break the rules a little bit more literally. The best example of this, by far, is Omega Flowey. Nothing this boss does is really a gimmick in the traditional sense. You still beat it by playing the same core game, but it does two things that immediately stand out. First, most of Undertale keeps you constrained to that little box in the middle of the screen. Even the hardest fights follow that rule. Flowey just shatters it. Literally, the fight takes over the entire screen. And the second thing that he does is he gets rid of the turn-based part of the game. Instead, you are actively trying to click on your buttons during combat. He's breaking the rules, but he's not changing the core game. Instead, he's taking the gameplay and pushing it into a more chaotic, intense version of itself. I'm not going to say it's not a gimmick at all, it definitely is, but it's a very specific kind, and when it's done well, it creates a perfect super boss. Black Myth Wukong does this incredibly well with its true final boss. Spoilers, obviously. You play as the reincarnation of Wukong, and the final boss is the original Wukong. Throughout the fight, he uses abilities that make it feel like you're not just fighting a boss, you're fighting something that plays by the same rules you do. My favorite moment by far is if you try to heal while the boss isn't doing anything. He freezes you in place using one of your own spells, walks up, steals your healing item, takes a sip, which does actually heal him, and then throws it back. You can avoid this happening, but he also will actually take one of your flask charges. It's hilarious, it makes perfect sense, and it completely breaks your expectation of what's supposed to happen when you heal. Normally, healing is safe if you create space. This fight says no, although it can only do it one time, which is good because it is a big heal for a hard boss. This single change does more than most massive mechanical overhauls can. Not that Wukong doesn't have bosses that do that. The 4 Heavenly Kings. Massive enemies that you fight by growing to match their scale, using a simplified version of the game's combat. It's similar enough to understand instantly, but different enough that it feels like something new. And that's the balance that these super form fights really need to hit. Another thing that I love is when a boss takes something the player can do and uses it against them. The best example of this for me is Sekiro. Sekiro? Fuck, I keep rolling the R. In this game you play as a ninja, and one of the coolest ninja techniques is the Mikiri counter. Against thrust attacks, you can stomp on them, and it does massive damage to the enemy's posture and can give you a critical hit. The person who taught you these ninja techniques, the Great Shinobi Owl, is a boss fight in the game. And the first time that I tried a thrust attack on him, he Mikiri countered me. This just felt right. Sure, this gets rid of one of your attack options, but only if you attempt a thrust while the boss isn't open. And while it breaks the rules of the game, it makes such perfect sense that he can do this that you almost feel stupid for even trying. It's also just hilarious. The final rule breaking that can happen to make a boss feel epic is one that you see all the time. It's when the player is just given superpowers in that big fight. You see this most often with RPGs. After a long, drawn-out adventure, the player awakens to their true power, or God gives them an assist, or they just get super determined and break their limits. Either way, the end result is the same. You get to play the same game as before, but with way stronger and cooler effects on your abilities, boosted stats, lower cooldowns, infinite super form, you name it. Devil May Cry does this by not letting you unlock Nero's Devil Trigger until the final level. Final Fantasy does this, usually giving you a crazy buffed moveset for a bit. When a game does this, it is fully playing into the power fantasy as opposed to the challenge, so usually it will do this as payoff to some of the hardest encounters of the game, or for lore reasons. The recent Spider-Man game actually did this. Peter gets the Venom symbiote and a really bad thing happens. So you storm the villain's lair with infinite health and way enhanced brutal attacks. So yeah, it's still the same game, but the rules have changed just enough to make it feel completely different. So yeah, if you want something to feel special but don't want to rely entirely on gimmicks, look for ways to break or bend the player's expectations. Sometimes a small change does more than completely reinventing the fight. With that said, what's a moment like this that stood out to you? As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya.